Americans condemned regulation of business as socialism, communism, and tyranny, and the conservative political leaders of the era overwhelmingly agreed. To them, any effort to curb business and help workers was a call for class warfare. Perhaps inevitably, given the temptations of unbridled power, the decade of business domination was a decade of destructive practices that inflicted real harm on millions of Americans. Of course, nostalgic free marketeers of today generally deny that their favorite era was beset by any of these sins. To do so would beg the question of how today's America could keep the same serpents out of the new unregulated Eden they want to create. As for the claims that FDR's New Deal failed to fix anything, the historical record provides ample evidence to the contrary. It is not my mission here to document the entire constructive legacy of the New Deal. Others have ably done that. I highly recommend Why the New Deal Matters by historian Eric Rauchway, which briefly but beautifully describes how Roosevelt left his mark on everyday life in today's America, with Social Security, unemployment insurance, new public parks and libraries, power-generating dams, land reclaimed from floods, and priceless murals and cultural archives. My mission, rather, is to describe just one of the New Deal's most significant achievements, clearing out the vicious jungle that was the nation's financial landscape in the 1920s and replacing it with a well-tended terrain where ordinary Americans could save and invest with confidence. That this particular New Deal experiment largely succeeded is proven by the post-war flourishing of an American middle class that did not fear losing its savings to crooked banks or being swindled by dishonest brokers. Freed of those fears, millions of Americans could save, invest their savings, buy homes, pay tuition for their children, and retire in comfort. By reforming Wall Street, Roosevelt enabled future generations of average Americans to participate in capitalism themselves and share directly in its rewards. We are an immensely richer nation because of this specific legacy of the New Deal. Roosevelt's primary tool for this transformation was the Securities and Exchange Commission, a watchdog agency initially considered so radical and threatening that the titans of Wall Street fought tooth and claw to kill it before it was born in 1934. The fight to set up the SEC, to make it work, and then to make it work better in its early years, is the heart of this story. My narrative opens on the eve of the great stock market crash of 1929, the prelude to the Great Depression. But to understand why FDR was so determined to reform Wall Street in the 1930s, let's march quickly back through the previous decade, the decade Roosevelt lived through before he entered the White House, the decade that showed him what unregulated capitalism looked like. The most obvious stain on the morality of the Roaring Twenties was prohibition, the nationwide constitutional ban on the sale of alcoholic beverages that went into effect in 1920, the year that saw the election of Republican President Warren G. Harding. By the end of the decade, the wildly unpopular dry laws had created a nation of scofflaws and a subculture of organized crime that plagued the nation for decades. But a close cousin to the gangsters running illegal booze were the respectable lawbreakers running corporate America and corrupting official Washington, where jazz-age appointees were eager to stuff the business world's bribes into their pockets. Too harsh? No. The corruption of the Harding administration was not equaled until President Nixon's Watergate scandal in the 1970s, and has not been trumped until our current era. The decade we call the Roaring Twenties didn't start with a roar, it started with a whimper. The sudden cuts in defense spending after the end of World War I in 1918 helped trigger one of the sharpest recessions the nation had experienced to that time. That downturn didn't end until 1922, and shorter, gentler recessions hit in 1924 and 1920.